Hey everybody, my name is Chris Massimo. Welcome back to the channel. I'm a licensed professional counselor and also a new JD. I just graduated from law school finally. I still have to take the bar here in a couple of weeks, but the portion of my life where I suffer in silence in the library is almost finally over, thankfully. Law school is a thing. It's a thing, as I've talked about in past videos, but today we're not talking about law. Today we're talking about therapy, and in particular the 5 things you need to pay attention to that may kind of signal that you got a
crap bag
therapist, or at least one that maybe isn't going to be a good fit for you. So these 5 things are in no particular order in terms of, importance, but I did kind of try to structure them in a way where it kind of goes through getting the therapy sessions going and then staying in them. So somewhat of a time kind of chronological order type of deal. So the first one is you need to start off with your intuition. So want to know if you have a bad therapist? Kind of listen to your gut. This is a very emotional process. It's intimate. It's supposed to be anyway. You shouldn't be sharing things with your therapist that you don't share with most people, if any people at all. And so you're going to get a feeling when you're sharing that kind of stuff, even in that first session, even maybe when you're looking at their profile online, you're going to get a feeling for if there's a vibe there. And you need to pay real close attention to that vibe. There are a lot of studies that talk about how, one of them is the common factors model, how the most important portion of successful therapeutic outcomes is the therapeutic relationship. In other words, are you vibing with your therapist? And that intuition is going to tell you that pretty quickly. Definitely in the first 4 sessions, I talk a lot about this. In 4 sessions, you should know whether or not you're on the right track with the right therapist, but even sometimes just from their profile, even sometimes just from the first session, you'll have a pretty good idea of whether or not you're vibing. And that's important. You need to listen to your gut. The second one is, does your therapist lack direction? You're going to know this one also pretty much from the first session, definitely from the first 4. In other words, from the first session, which is called an intake session, the therapist should be gathering a ton of information about you, asking a lot of questions, almost to the point of being quite annoying. But really, we're trying to get kind of the frame of the puzzle so that eventually we can start filling in the pieces. In order to do that, again, we have to ask a lot of good questions and inquire as to different parts of your life. From there, we should be creating what's called a treatment plan. And that treatment plan doesn't necessarily dictate the subsequent session time, but it does sort of direct it or reel it in, if you will, keep it within guardrails, right? Hopefully starting with the most either potent and prominent problems or the ones that you can change the quickest to create some momentum. So if you ever ask your therapist, like, what's the plan with our time? What are we doing going forward? What are we focusing on? They should be able to answer that. And if they can't, they have a bad therapist. All right, 3, poor communication. And I mean this in 2 primary ways. The first is, can they articulate themselves? This is important because in a therapeutic relationship, I like to say that the client is the expert of their lives, but the therapist is the expert of the field. And you're supposed to be working together to get to a centralized point of focus and understanding. In order to do that, the therapist's portion of articulation needs to do 2 things well. The first is articulate their understanding, which I'll get to here in a second, of what is going on with you. And the second is to articulate things about the field, maybe empirical research, or maybe, next steps, how to articulate what you need to do going forward so it's clear and you have something that you can actually do in between sessions and you're not confused trying to figure out how to implement stuff. The second form of communication is, we'll call it professionalism, I suppose. How do they respond to emails? How do they greet you? How do they say goodbye? Kind of like does this person take their career seriously? Or is this kind of, just a buddy who's collecting a check? You want them to take it seriously. You want them to communicate in those more professional ways with you well. The 4th thing is a lack of empathy and understanding. So as I said, number 3, if they can articulate that they understand what you're going through, then you're probably not a good therapist. I'll be frank with you, the majority of what we do in graduate school to become a therapist isn't really study this research so you know how to deal with this problem. We have those classes, but what predominates our time is developing the soft skills. Theoretically, you should become a very open, communicative person who can connect well with others, right? So if they can't seem to articulate that or mesh with you or meet you where you're at, there may be a problem. And here's kind of how you can visualize the difference, right? Sympathy is staring at a person inside a hole, that hole being a metaphor for your problem, and, you know, kind of just reflecting back what's happening. Just, you said this, I say it back to you. I'm standing outside the hole and I'm looking down. Empathy is grabbing a ladder, getting in the hole with you, and articulating it in such a way that you feel like I'm there with you. Nobody has to do that perfectly, but they have to be able to get to a place where you feel like the way that they alter that reflection. So you say A, they respond with B, but B is very close to A. So they're not just, you know, parroting back to you. They're demonstrating understanding because they're repeating it to you in a way that sounds a lot like what you were saying, with maybe even more elaboration and clarity than the way you said it. And now it's making you feel like they're in the hole with you. They can't do that, you may have a bad therapist. Okay, number 5, the last one. A lack of emphasis on ethics. And what do I mean by that? This one may take a while, if we're staying in our chronological order here, this one may take a while for you to see, but every so often, even in the first session when you talk about good faith estimate laws or some, you know, the contracts that you sign to get the process going, the therapeutic relationship, etc., your therapist should care about ethics. They should care about your privacy. They should care about your security. They should care about making sure that the environment is safe for you, like the physical location of the office. Do they care? Do they sometimes mention from time to time, hey, we're going to communicate in this way to secure your privacy? Or, hey, you know, you mentioned our office didn't feel comfortable because X, Y, and Z, and so I implemented A, B, and C to help deal with that. Are they going, not necessarily above and beyond, but are they at least mentioning the bare minimum of ethics every so often when it's applicable to do so? If they just casually go through those things, social media, contracts, safety of office, etc., particularly when you bring up them as concerns yourself, then you may have a bad therapist. In fact, you may have a therapist who might need to lose their license. That's a totally different conversation. Okay, so those are the 5 things that you should be aware of if you think that you may have a bad therapist. And remember, you can address these things with them. Maybe give them an opportunity, especially if you build rapport, to correct some of these things. They should be receptive to it. Should be receptive to it. You would think your therapist should be receptive. But if not, you know, no harm, no foul. A little bit of harm, a little bit of foul. Paid money, sucks. But better to transition to a new therapist than to keep paying this one if you guys don't mesh and it doesn't work and they're a bad therapist. Okay, I hope that was helpful for you guys. If there's anything in particular you'd like for me to talk about, as always, you gotta leave a comment below or reach out to me on social media. I appreciate you guys hopping by, and I hope to see you again soon.